Okay. All right. We'd like to invite you, welcome you to the Michigan Peace Council's monthly membership meeting. And it's the first Monday of every month. And we would like to thank you for joining us. And we're going to, the format for tonight is we're going to have a discussion for the first hour with two special guests. And after that, we're going to have the members stay on for our membership meeting and anyone else who cares to be part of that membership meeting. The question tonight is, where is the anti-war movement? Now, this was obviously asked before this recent Ukrainian crisis developed, and a lot of people are wondering what's happened to the anti-war movement when there were other wars going on, like in Yemen and Syria and all the other wars. For a long time, it hasn't been on the streets. Now it's starting to happen, especially because of the Yemen thing, because of the Ukraine crisis. So I'm sure we'll address that tonight, but we're more or less addressing the entire question of where is the peace movement? What is the peace movement? What are these two groups that we have representatives from doing? What do they hope to do? What do they think we should be doing in the peace movement? And after this half hour or 15 minutes of each guest, we're going to have a half an hour of open discussion for anyone who wants to say anything, questions, comments to our guests. So my name is Bill Meyer, and I'm the chair of the Michigan Peace Council, which is a chapter of the U.S. Peace Council, which is a member of the World Peace Council. And I'm sure that Bahman Azad will explain that more clearly. But I want to mention that there were a lot of things going on. Yesterday, there was a big rally in Detroit that Richard Peacock was part of, and some of you here were also part of it. It was a nice turnout, nice to see people out on the streets again against war. But I have to say that I think some of us made it clear that this was an anti-war rally that we put on, and a lot of the other rallies that you're seeing now are anti-Putin, anti-Russia rallies. It's a different thing than anti-war, and we'll talk about that later for sure. But the situation is that many people are not aware of the role of the U.S. empire and the U.S. involvement in certainly in Ukraine and in the rest of the world. There's wars in Yemen. That 300,000 children, I think, have died so far. It's a tragedy. There's many wars all around the world that we all are concerned with. So we'll address that when we talk to our two speakers. So we're going to give them each 10, 15 minutes to talk and say whatever they would like to say. And I'll introduce you to the first speaker will be Reverend Richard Peacock, which we all know very well here in Detroit area. He's the co-chair of Peace Action of Michigan. And that's an affiliation of Peace Action, the largest grassroots peace organization in the U.S. with over 100,000 members. Richard is a retired United Methodist pastor who spent 35 years serving churches in the southeast Michigan. Under his leadership, churches have sponsored a refugee family from Cambodia, developed crop walks to provide food at home and abroad, and partnered with a church in Liberia to support good governance. He's known for introducing anti-war resolutions for Michigan United Methodists and has chaired the Methodist Federation for Social Action. He led the Detroit area church Martin Luther King celebrations and the Keep Making Peace educational forums for over 15 years. He's led the establishment of scholarships for students interested in peacemaking at North Central College and Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary in Illinois. Rich lives in Sterling Heights with his wife, Jan, of 53 years. We beat you by 2 years. And they have sons in Cleveland and Louisiana. So we all know Reverend Richard Peacock as Rich. And we give you the floor, Richard, to address these questions and concerns about where is the peace movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it. This will be a very personal perspective on the peace movement. And it comes from a person who's been inside Methodism and inside Peace Action of Michigan. I want to talk about 4 areas. I want to look at some of the high points of the peace movement, the obstacles that we face, our current challenges, and then forces for peace, what I see as the various allies that we have for peacemaking these days. For me, one of the high points was the resistance to the Vietnam War. We had good numbers back then. We had good music. We had celebrities. There is a book entitled "The People Make the Peace," and I think we had a good part in bringing that war to an end. Unfortunately, it took a long time. It took a long time, and too many were killed, wounded for life. The second high point has to do with nuclear bombs. At one point there were some 66,000 nuclear weapons. Now we're down to 1,550 ready to go for each the United States and Russia. One of the factors in decreasing the number of bombs was the freeze campaign. It was a unifying idea, and we think it even influenced President Reagan. A third high point was the huge demonstrations against the Bush war on Iraq. We had large numbers of people around the world. It was very much a unifying time internationally. We had good numbers. Didn't work, but we gave it a really good effort. Then another event that Peace Action was involved in especially was in the Iran deal. It was signed in 2015. Here in Michigan, we did a very high pressure job with Senator Peters and Stabenow to get them to approve it. And it was a good experience in that we had progressive Jews along with us. So that was a high point of getting something done. And then a lot of peace people were involved in supporting Bernie Sanders, and his platform was very much in line with what we've been working for. We didn't get Bernie as president, and we got Joe Biden, and that's both a plus and a minus. So what are the obstacles to the peace movement? Well, one obstacle is that we don't have a primary motivation. A primary motivation against the Vietnam War had to do with the draft. I know that we had students in seminary who were there to escape the draft. Another primary motivation for people around me were the killings at Kent State and Jackson State. We don't have that kind of a crystallizing motivation at this point. We also don't have leadership within the religious community. Back in the Vietnam days, the clergy and lay concerned about Vietnam, the National Council of Churches, were very powerful and quite effective within the religious community. So that worked well, but that's an obstacle now. A real obstacle is militarism. I think there are at least three aspects to militarism. One is overreaching militarily around the world. Some 800 US bases around the world. We have all kinds of places, maybe 85 countries where we are training people to fight. So we're reaching everywhere. And another part of militarism is the military-industrial complex. It has huge money. it has political power, it has resources galore. And then a third part is the pork barrel. The defense industry has been very clever in putting defense jobs, war-making jobs, if you will, in every congressional district. So it's often a jobs argument that the military and defense provides good jobs. Well, that's false. You can get many more jobs if you put the same amount of our taxes into education or healthcare, for example. So the militarism all adds up to huge Pentagon spending, and it adds up to political posturing. Nobody can afford to be soft, afford to be seen as soft in terms of supporting the military. And one other aspect that grinds at me is how the military pays the National Football League to promote itself with flyovers and so forth. The advertising is just amazing. Another obstacle that we have is poverty. There are too many people who are just trying to survive, working perhaps 2 jobs. They don't have time for peace activities and demonstrations. All along the years, I've been aware of clergy who have churches with poor people, and they are forced to spend a whole bunch of time in charity, just helping their people survive. They don't have time or make time to work on the Pentagon system. And in terms of poverty, there are people who are not getting fair wages, and we've done a poor job of allying with the working class, with African Americans, Hispanics, and speaking of these different groups, we've also done a poor job of relating to young adults. And good for them, they've gotten on the global heating bandwagon. The Sunrise Movement, for example, is large and young adult led, and we really salute their involvement in trying to save our planet from burning up. Rabbi Abraham Heschel said that our primary emotion should be embarrassment, to be confronted with the gap not only between rich and poor, but between what is and what ought to be. So all of us can be chagrined at the income and wealth inequality, and that prevents us, and that is something we have to overcome. Another obstacle is President Trump. He got us out of the Iran deal, out of the Paris deal, out of the Open Skies Treaty, out of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. He cozied up to Israel. One good thing that came out of the Trump era was the women's movement. We see women involved in advocacy and in running for office. And along with that, in Michigan, we have the indivisible fighting 9 in these indivisible forces. Okay. Another obstacle, paradoxically, is the New START Treaty. It does limit the number of deployed nuclear weapons. However, in order to get that passed, President Obama promised to modernize the nuclear weapons industry. So we still have mutually assured destruction, and we have a lot of complacency about that. Many of us remember duck and cover and other kinds of experiences that awoke us. And those experiences don't seem to be happening today. So what are the challenges? Where are the challenges? Well, the big challenge is Pentagon spending. There was the Overseas Contingency Operations Fund, in which all kinds of money went to Iraq, fighting Iraq, and who knows where. Now that's all put together. The current budget is $778 billion, which is 25 billion more than even what President Biden and the Pentagon asked for. It's forecast that the next year, 2023, the budget could go to $800 billion. That's half of our taxes going there. It's larger than the next 10 countries combined for their military. And many of those countries are our allies. It dwarfs the social legislation such as Build Back Better. So the one challenge is Pentagon spending. The second one is the modernization of nuclear weapons. We're supposed to modernize all three legs, the ICBMs, the bombers, and the submarines. What's one of the things being proposed is the ground-based strategic deterrence, big missile, and also being proposed and actually implemented are more usable, battlefield-friendly nukes. And at the same time, we have 400 ICBMs in North Dakota, Montana, and so forth. And many of those ICBM bombs are 20 times the power of destruction of Hiroshima. Coming up as a challenge is the nuclear posture review. Every new president gets to write the nuclear strategy. Biden has been in favor of no first use of nuclear weapons. It doesn't look like that's going to be in the plan. Nuclear posture review are the plans for a war, and probably the instances of using nukes will be expanded in those various plans. A big challenge is the military-industrial complex, and the media is a part of that, and Congress is a part of that. Militarism is driven by the fact that we have to be militarily supreme. We are the indispensable, exceptional nation. We have to be able to fight wars on at least 3 different fronts. And part of this whole military supremacy is supported by Christian nationalism. Another driver of militarism is political money, including the dark money, the money that funds think tanks and candidates. The military-industrial complex has about 800 lobbyists in Washington, D.C., a huge number. And then there's the revolving door between the military and the merchants of death.
Rich,
and that's another.
Yeah, we got about 1 minute left.
Oh boy. Let me just skip and go quickly to peace forces, okay? Education-wise, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, the Quincy Institute, Common Dreams, Juan Cole are things that I pay attention to. Council for a Livable World is an outstanding political action committee that funds candidates in terms of nuclear disarmament. Here in Detroit area, we've got the Detroit Area Peace of Justice Network, and that includes a good group in Livonia and Huntington Woods. We've got the DSA pretty active. And then I'll close by saying that Michigan Peace Action, we're organizing to abolish nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, a peace economy, and peaceful resolutions. Basically, we do what is lobbying, trying to lobby our senators and specifically Representative Andy Levin. We, along with others, have been supporting the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. January 22nd was a 1-year anniversary. And that's the most international peace movement that's going on. So that's very important across the world. We have one event I'll publicize coming up, and that's a Zoom event on April 12th. Professor Fran Schor will be talking about our empire, declining empire, and what that means as we go down and try to keep on fighting. So if you send us your email to peaceactionmich.org, we'll send you a Zoom to that. So briefly, I would say in summary, the peace movement these days gets a grade of D-. We don't have a good plan. We don't have unity. We don't have power in terms of numbers or money. And we're lacking leadership. Although the one exception to that might be the Poor People's Campaign and Reverend William Barber, because that's expanded to include the peace and environment. Nevertheless, if we don't work to make peace, who will? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Richard Peacock, the co-chair of the Michigan Peace Action of Michigan, and active in many other groups. And he didn't mention it, but there is a coalition formed in Michigan now called the Michigan Peace Alliance, which already has about 18 member groups. And if you're part of a group that works on peace and justice, you should be part of this Michigan Peace Alliance. They're going to have a webpage soon, but you can contact us or Richard if you need to know more about that. It's just a collection spot so we can all know what each other's doing and informing each other. Thank you so much for your comments. You said a lot of stuff, and we don't have a lot of time to give you. I appreciate what you did. And I do want to mention to the folks who came on after that we are going to have a presentation from Bahman Azad, and then we'll have an open question and answer discussion for half an hour. And then for those of you who are members or who want to hang on, we'll have our regular membership meeting after this discussion. We're very... and the video will be available from this discussion part of it after this on Facebook. Our next guest, special guest, is Bahman Azad, who's an Iranian-American peace activist and who's been involved in the struggle for peace and justice in the U.S. and around the world since the 70s. He's a retired professor of sociology and economics with a doctoral degree in sociology and a master's degree in economics. Bahman is the executive secretary of the U.S. Peace Council, of which we are a chapter of. He's a representative of the World Peace Council at the United Nations and a member of the Administrative Committee of the United National Anti-War Coalition, UNAC. He's also served as co-chair of Venezuelan Embassy Protectors Defense Committee, the coordinator of the Coalition Against U.S. Foreign Military Bases, and the Global Campaign Against U.S. and NATO Military Bases. He's co-coordinator of the Hands Off Syria Coalition and the People's Mobilization. He's also one of the coordinators of the Move the Money to Human Needs campaign. So his area of research includes the political economy of capitalism and socialism, and his articles on this subject have appeared in such journals as Political Affairs and Nature, Society, and Thought. He's the author of a book called Heroic Struggle, Bitter Defeat, Factors Contributing to the Dismantling of the Socialist State in the USSR, published by International Publishers, New York. We're very grateful to have him join us tonight, and we've only given him 15 minutes to cover a lot of stuff. So, Bahman, it's all yours. Thank you so much for being here. I got to unmute you, right? Okay, hang on. Okay, there you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. And it's a pleasure to be in the presence of Reverend Peacock. and being among the members of our own organization in Michigan. I don't know how much I should tell you first about the U.S. Peace Council. As Bill mentioned, U.S. Peace Council is a member of the World Peace Council. World Peace Council has 90 national peace organizations around the world from 90 countries as members. It used to be much more than that, but after the collapse of Soviet Union, the number has diminished as a lot of people got disillusioned. U.S. Peace Council is a member of Secretariat of the World Peace Council, 13-member Secretariat of the World Peace Council, and I'm actually representing U.S. Peace Council in that Secretariat. We have been involved in international as well as national peace activities. Internationally, as a part of the World Peace Council, we have been involved in supporting Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Syria. And we have been part of an international campaign to help those things, those movements. Nationally, we have been working closely with many organizations. We know that there's a division in the peace movement on top of the problems that Reverend Peacock mentioned in terms of lack of leadership and all other problems. We have some kind of split between the left and right side of the peace movement. And both U.S. Peace Council has consistently tried to bring together the two sides of the movement. We have been for a long time acting as a bridge to unify the movement. And here and there we have been successful, and here and there we have been unsuccessful. One of the last successes we had was bringing together 18 different prominent all national organizations together and start a kind of a regular meeting of all organizations to discuss their interests, their issues, what they're doing, and how we can cooperate and coordinate with each other. And we are hoping that out of that will become some kind of coordinated effort to overcome the obstacles that we are facing. One of the main things that we believe is lacking in the peace movement in the United States is an anti-imperialist perspective. And I'm glad that Reverend Peacock at the end mentioned that, the empire, because we are living in an empire. And we have to understand the nature of it in order to be able to correct the problems with it. Many people think that it is a result of Democrats being in power or Republicans being in power or this person being the president or that person being the president. We don't believe so. We believe that what is going on in terms of war, militarism, and everything else that was listed is the nature of the system itself. The system can only survive through these things. And the reason for that is we have our economic system, we constitute 27% of the world production. Our investments are around the world, everywhere. And definitely we know where the trade and economy goes, military has to follow to protect. And this is how we are put on the course of being the policeman of the world. And this has to do with our global corporate operations around the world and the influence that this corporate establishment in general, which is the core of what we call imperialism, is dictating its own interests on our government. So the battle is not only at the political arena in our view, it's more of a combined effort that has to deal with also the power of big corporations. And this power goes, as was mentioned, in the Congress, in the media, in the schools, everywhere. They are controlling the whole narrative and agenda and the direction of our economy and everything else. So we think that fighting the empire the essence of the empire, the structure of the imperialism, is the key to understanding what we should do. Our efforts are misdirected in many ways toward appealing to individuals, to Congress, to presidents, as if they are the ones who determine the issues. This is not the case. The power of corporation overshadows everything else, and we have to deal with that part. We think that our media is not doing its job, but it's doing its job. Media is a business. They're selling things the same way as others do. They're not selling as tangible goods. They are saying intangible goods, selling. And they are driven by the same profit motive. And they share the same interests with big corporate establishment. So they are doing their job, protecting their own interests, their own profit. And that is how it goes. Most of their money comes from, advertising from corporations. So they know what they should say, what not to say. Some of the stockholders are arms, the military industrial complex companies. We know that. So what do you expect from the media? And look at what the alternative media is doing. We are suppressed. We can't do anything. We don't have our own voice to reach the community, to the people, and explain what is going on. These are the main obstacles that we're dealing with, and we have to find ways of overcoming them. One of them is not having a coherent leadership, coherent movement in the United States. And that we have to solve. It's a problem that we have to solve. We have been trying. But there's big obstacles that we have to overcome. And the main fundamental issue is understanding the nature of the system we're dealing with. And that's the problem. So US Peace Council has been fighting for bringing understanding of the nature of imperialism, globally and domestically, to the public. And we see it as our primary mission as a way to open the way for making changes in the system as a whole. And that is the critical point. And to be honest, since this Ukraine has overshadowed everything, I want to get into that as an example. How at this moment, our peace movement is in disarray about that. We know, of course, at least people in the Peace Council know, that since the collapse of Soviet Union, dismantling of the USSR, the United States became the sole superpower, the hegemon of the world, and decided that, and it is in the documents of the government, the project for the new American century, to all of those white papers of the Pentagon and the Foreign and the State Department. US is bent on not allowing another competitor or rival like Russia, like Soviet Union, to appear on the world scene. There is also a general strategy of crushing any regional power, in any area that resists US full domination. They call it full spectrum domination. That resists it and interferes with US plans in different regions of the world. So on the global level, the US considers the strengthening and development of China and Russia as the main threat in the 21st century. And they have to be stopped. It is US imperialism that looks at it that way, not American people. At the regional level, we know that all of the countries that are hoping or trying or struggling to maintain their independence from US domination are in the crosshairs of the United States. We know that 7 countries after 9/11 were listed as the targets of regime change. US has gone through them one by one. Syria, Libya, right? Iraq, all of them, except Iran. And now the target is Iran. And had the US succeeded with Iraq, quickly. Probably with Iran, it would have come long time ago. But they were kind of stuck in Iraq for a long time, and in Afghanistan also. And as a result, they couldn't continue with the rest of the list, but they are now getting back to it. The same with Latin America. Being stuck in Iraq and Afghanistan for a while, they forgot about Latin America. And progressive governments came to power one after the other. In Brazil, Lula, if you remember, right? In Venezuela, in Nicaragua, Sandinistas won back the elections and all that. So, and the US is going back again. After pulling out of Iraq, after pulling out of Afghanistan, now they're refocusing again on these other countries on the list. And I don't know if you know that or not, NATO is expanding into, on top of the eastward one towards Russia, is expanding toward Latin America. They have declared Colombia as a global partner of NATO. They are negotiating with Brazil to join as a global partner so far, because the membership is a long process. Now, they started doing that, knowing that, considering the fact that they considered Russia and China as the main growing threats to the interests of global empire, they're focused on Russia and China. Russia tolerated your NATO expanding eastward into at least 14 countries. We know the history of it, right? Since the dismantling of the USSR, especially since 2000. 3 countries of those new members are on the border of Russia, but they're too small to be threatening in some ways. But Ukraine is now the main target of NATO to turn it into a member and a NATO base against Russia. Ukraine has over 1,400 miles shared border with Ukraine. If US, and I'm glad you mentioned that the INF was canceled, right? Intermediate range missile systems that the US and Russia had agreed on, actually before Russia, the Soviet Union agreed on, US pulled out afterwards, that no government, neither side will station these missiles on the border of the other one. With INF gone, now the US has a free hand to take over Ukraine, station those mid-range, intermediate range missiles on the border of Russia within 6 minutes of every city of Russia. Just imagine if Russia had come to Mexico and did the same thing. What would it do? Last time something similar to that happened was the Cuban Missile Crisis, if you remember. And we went to the edge of a global nuclear war. We threatened with nuclear war. And if Soviet Union had not withdrawn its missiles, probably we wouldn't exist now.
1 minute, Bahman.
Okay. So what we are facing today is a Russian response to what the US and NATO is trying to do. For a while, Europeans were trying to take the middle ground, trying to avoid a direct confrontation. But I don't know what happened in the Munich Peace Conference of European Union, that suddenly the whole thing changed. Europe moved back toward the US, and Russia felt totally alone in this and had no choice but to react. Whether this was a correct response or not, history will judge. I'm not going to support or condemn. But the problem is that our movement suddenly, blindly, went full force in condemnation of Russia for this response. There are some moral values involved that they need to be discussed that apparently were violated. But the whole question is, if we want peace, we have to destroy or eliminate the causes of war, not the symptoms of war. Russian response is a response to 20 years of threat by NATO. A response to the coup that changed Ukraine from a neutral state to a NATO state, de facto. US has poured in billions and billions of dollars of NATO weapons into Ukraine. So even if Ukraine is not a formal member, it's de facto member, because Russians worried that the NATO weapons would be stationed in Ukraine has been partly realized. And it was an existential threat to Russia. So we have to really think about it and not blindly fall or be duped into becoming another contingent of imperialist propaganda against Russia and become mouthpieces for what NATO is trying to do to Russia and China. I say the last thing, I don't know if you're aware that during Biden administration, US has started to meddle with Taiwan, an area, a part that China, a country that, it's not a country, yes, a country that China considers as a part of its own motherland. And there has been agreements between US and all other countries with China that they will not interfere in the affairs of Taiwan. 2-3 days ago, a high-ranking military, intelligence, security, and State Department delegation of Biden administration traveled to Taiwan to meet with the governor of Taiwan. And interestingly, Pompeo simultaneously at the same time traveled to Taiwan, apparently on a personal visit, not for any mission. Now they're putting their thumb on Chinese red line, Taiwan.
We have time up.
Okay? So we have to understand this global picture, what is going on, before jumping on the bandwagon of condemnation of Russia and possibly tomorrow China. So we have to be careful about that. That's my, sorry, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you, Bahman. And if there was, we could all have our mics on, we'd applaud both of you for speaking. Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Bahman. I know it's difficult to talk about all this stuff in 15 minutes. And we did cover a lot of territory. We want to try to focus on the role of the peace movement and where it's at in regards to these warnings that we've been hearing from both our speakers, and acknowledgement that there is splits in the peace movement, misunderstandings. Of course, a lot of us are misled by Western propaganda, and propaganda can be truthful and it can be lies. So we're always in search of the truth. And we're trying to do that here, and we want to hear your points of view, your questions if you have, but obviously we don't have a lot of time. This is not a webinar or a long session. This is just before our meeting. So if you want to speak, make a comment or ask a short comment or a short question to either speaker, they'll both be on and available. You can either put your hand up in the window with your action button at the bottom, raise hand, and it would go in order from that, or you can put your name in the chat under, just say stack. That means you want to speak if you want to put it in stack, and I'll try to read that. We have some comments in the chat already that you can all share, and once this video is completed, I think the chat will also be available. But If you do want to save it for yourself, you have to do it before the meeting ends. It just you can save the chat from the option at the bottom. So let's keep the comments as short as we can so that more people can speak, because we don't have a lot of time for everybody, and we want to give everybody a chance. So first of all, thank you for being here for our meeting and being part of this discussion. It's just a touch of it. We've got a lot to discuss on this issue. We're going to start with Damon Hartley, who we know real well, and he moved out of town, and we don't see him very much anymore, but we'll get to see him on Zoom here. So, hey, Damon, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, because it said not unmute. Okay, we're good. I wanted to speak because I'm going to have to leave early. But I just wanted to, first of all, say how much I appreciated what Richard had to say and what Bahman had to say. I think the whole question of the peace movement, right, is that it's taking advantage, I guess, to a certain extent of the material conditions as they develop before us. And right now is the greatest opportunity for us to be able to breathe life into the peace movement with what's happening in the Ukraine. And I think one of the reasons why you see all these misguided folks with the Ukrainian flags, et cetera, is that this is the first time that folks have actually seen what a war is like. I mean, live and on television. I mean, it's saturated. If they would have seen this kind of report or this kind of coverage during Iraq or Afghanistan, what the U.S. was doing to those peoples in their country, that war would have ended in a hot second. So, and being, having worked for the corporate media, I understand how that works. And so that's one thing. And the other thing is what I've noticed is that looking around the Zoom, probably the average age of folks here is around 70. And that's all well and good. I mean, because, we're the elders. We have a certain amount of knowledge and wisdom based on our own practical experience. But I think it's really important for us to try to figure out how are we going to reach the youth? How are we going to draw them into a peace movement? And they're out there. I mean, I'm active with the DSA. I'm active with the Poor People's Campaign. I'm active with Sunrise Movement. Being a photographer, I have a ticket. I can just go to these different rallies and protests and demonstrations, photograph people, meet people, put them up, and get involved and have some legitimacy right away. But I think that we do have to concentrate on the young people and make them understand that the way this is going, the draft could be any day. And I think, as was mentioned earlier, it was the draft that really contributed to the peace movement during the Vietnam War. I'm a Vietnam era veteran. I lost 20 kids from my high school in East Detroit during the war. When I got out of the military, I was in for 4 years in the Navy as a corpsman. My attitude was kill a communist for Christ. 2 years later, I was involved in some of the biggest anti-war marches in Macomb County. So people's thinking can change, and it can change rapidly. And so I think that, and also when you look at the George Floyd demonstrations and marches, 26 million young people were involved in that. Millennials and the Zoomers. And that's a place for us to think about concentrating some of our efforts. And it is difficult for us seniors to recruit young people. So we have to find some of the leaders of these young people, and they can do that, what is necessary to bring them about. That's it.
All right, Damon, thank you so much for your comments. Okay, Maris is waving her hand. You can wave your hand, you can put your hand icon up, or you can put something in the chat that says stack. Now, first I'm going to give Richard or Bahman a chance. If you do want to respond to anything Damon said, feel free to.
I'd like to respond to Bahman with appreciation of really working to identify the underlying systems and causes. I do want to just a little bit spell out the discussions that we're having in the peace movement. Some of us, 1, 2, 3. Number one, we condemn Russian aggression. Number two, we push for negotiations and compromises, such as no NATO expansion. Ukraine should be neutral. The Minsk agreements are a way to start. We're building a missile base in Poland 100 miles from Russia. That ought to be discontinued. And then thirdly, we have to come up with a way to prioritize humanitarian aid. There's enough money in Americans' pockets to really help over there. The only trouble is it's in our pockets, and we have to find a channel for humanitarian aid that works.
All right, thanks. Bahman, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with Damien and also what Reverend Peacock said. I personally, I'll make it clear that I did not mean that appealing to these officials and all that is not necessary. What I was trying to say is that limiting ourselves to that will not get anywhere. We have to really push from below by organizing the people and informing the people. Because so long as it's only going upward, the pressure from certain organizations or groups, it's not going to bear fruit. We need organizing, as was mentioned, the youth, linking them up with the real history of the movement and informing them of the past experiences and let them decide how to proceed in today's age. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. So, Richard and Bahman, I made you co-hosts so you can turn your mics on and off on your own and respond whenever you want to anybody speaking. Maris Hershert is a member of our Michigan Peace Council, and I'd like to invite her to speak next. Go ahead, Maris.
Hi, I wanted to thank you both for speaking, and I certainly agree that we need the young people involved, and they're very good at technology, which I find daunting at times. I was wondering, Bahman, if you knew that the Prime Minister of Israel had a meeting with Putin, and the concept of, annexing territory and causing so much pain and hardship for the last 74 years in Palestine, and nothing really has been done by the peace movement to support what's been going on there. And they were bombed in last May, and our President Biden wanted to go back channel instead of allowing a resolution in the Security Council. I think there's got to be some pushback by the peace movement in the United States against the big pass they're giving Israel, especially with Amnesty International coming out February 1st, calling it what it is. So I have to go now to another meeting that's going to be discussing this issue. But that's where I've been following this since 2004 with a little kindergarten in El Aqaba, West Bank Area C, that we've been trying to keep standing from getting demolished by the Israeli government. And they're now back in that village since the mayor died last July, destroying things.
All right, Maris, yes, you definitely raised the question that everyone's asking, where is the peace movement? This was the question before the Ukraine thing happened. Where were they when the Palestinians were being slaughtered? Where are they when the Yemenis are being slaughtered? Where were they? For a long time, there was nothing happening. Now, all of a sudden, there's a war, supposedly. This is not an anti-war movement that's going on in Ukraine or around the world. This is actually a reaction to a country who's actually trying to end the war in Ukraine that was started back in 2014. They want to stop the war. But the U.S. government has never been against war. I mean, that's how we survive. That's how the empire survives on war. So this is a feast for the U.S. empire right now with all these people protesting what's going on in Ukraine. This is not anti-war. They're sending weapons to Ukraine. Is that anti-war? You want to end the war? You don't send weapons there. You don't send mercenaries there. You don't promote, give them more money so they can kill themselves, kind of stuff. So this is not the anti-war movement we're talking about. We need an anti-war movement. So, Bahman or Rich, you want to respond to this?
Go ahead, Rich.
Get on mute. I thought you could. Go ahead.
Well, I want to say that we're looking for more leadership in terms of the rights of the Palestinians. I pay attention to Jewish Voice for Peace and BDS, but I can't say anything more than those.
Okay, thank you.
I can add a few things. I think one of the major problems of our peace movement is that it's not acting systematically. In what I mean, the environmentalists are only worried about the environment. The civil rights groups are only worried about civil rights. The anti-war groups are only dealing with the anti-war. The problem is none of them see the linkage between what they are fighting for and the other one. They think that you can achieve disarmament without defeating militarism as a policy, right? And if you can achieve demilitarizing United States without dealing with the whole issue of empire building. So environment, the wars are also equal destroyers of the environment. If you remember in Iraq war, on the first day of it, 300 cruise missiles were fired on Baghdad, right? And then the tanks of United States roared from Kuwait all the way to Baghdad, right? You know these tanks, some of the people who are in the military know that. These tanks burn 9 gallons per mile, right? Not 9 miles per gallon, 9 gallons per mile. How much gas was used? How much fuel was used in that attack? Those who are fighting for solar energy don't see that this relationship there, that is stopping the war is also supporting the environment. These are the things that we have to really take care of. I mean, take account of. I give you an example. I'm all support of anti-nuclear struggle, but don't we see that they have come up with many newer ones that they can use without dismantling or even given, okay, we dismantle this and we use another kind of weapon, laser weapons, microwave weapons, all of those things. When they start the Space Force, do you think satellites will carry bombs with them to the orbit? Or they have a laser gun to destroy from the sky? You know, these are all related. And we have to look at it in a comprehensive way, see the whole picture, and relate these causes and come to the help of each other. The same with the issue of Palestine. There's only a certain number of groups that are dealing with that. Nobody else comes to the support. Oh, we are too busy dealing with the environment. We are dealing with war. We are dealing with that. But this is part of it. It's the same thing happening everywhere. And the main cause for all of them is the same thing. Imperialism.
Thank you, Bahman. Yes. And by the way, our next month's discussion will be around imperialism and anti-imperialism. on the next meeting, and we're trying to address that with our local chapter. Jim Ryan will be next speaking, and I want to mention there's a lot going on in the chat, and a lot of ideas going around. We appreciate it. So if you save the chat before the meeting ends, you can also relate to some links that were put in there also. So Jim Ryan is from the Veterans for Peace, Detroit. Welcome to the group, Jim.
Thank you, Bill. Yes, I'm
I'm
a
sorry.
member of Veterans for Peace in Detroit, but I'm also a member of the Climate Crisis and Militarism Project, which is a national group within Veterans for Peace. And it's a bunch of veterans and associates coming together to try and push what Rich was talking about, the link between militarism and climate change. And I just want to point out the big tragedy of this Ukraine issue is that it's going to boost a increase in military spending. And my conversations and reading the documents of Nita Crawford, who is the co-chair of the Cost of War project at Boston University, she points out as military spending increases, so does emissions. So this is at exactly the wrong time, especially with the IPCC report saying that we were running out of time. So that's what I wanted to point out, and really appreciate all the good words that have been spoken before I came on. Thank you.
Is it okay if I begin speaking? I can't hear. My internet goes in and out. So can you hear me? Well, anyway, I'm going to just speak.
Bill,
One
Bill,
thing.
your mic is off.
Oh, my mic is off. Oh,
No,
darn.
Bill's is.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
One thing.
I'm sorry, Sharon. I'm sorry. My mic was off.
Oh,
Yeah, we can
okay.
hear
One
you.
thing
We can hear you
okay.
talking, so go ahead. Go ahead.
One thing I would say is that in the mainstream, this is just a comment, in the mainstream, still speaking up against Israel is anti-Semitic. It's considered anti-Semitic, which is a huge problem. And the other thing I would like to say is I've appreciated everyone's comments, but I believe that with the change in technology, the media that we're dealing with, the internet, and all the other capabilities technology has, we haven't come up with a way to deal with it. We come up with a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and we're going to try this. But I think that we have the capability, but I don't think we've reached an understanding how to really put our ideas out in a way where it's going to be effective. And I think that's okay, because if we keep talking and we keep working together, we'll come up with something. But I think we're caught with not developing a technique yet to deal with things. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Okay, no one else has their hand up, and no one's waving frantically, and no one's mentioned stack in the chat that I can see. There's a lot of good stuff in the chat, so we might be rounding it out here. We want to. This is just a brief discussion. This is not a full webinar or Zoom meeting on this issue. A lot has to be discussed about this. We just wanted to present this for discussion because the peace movement needs to get together, and I think we all agree on that we have to find a way to broaden the coalition and get people working on the same path and the same track. And both our guests help clarify the issues that we have to deal with and which way to go. And Sharon had one more thing she wants to say. Go ahead, Sharon.
Does anybody have any comment about what I said? I never get a comment back about what I say, and it leaves me feeling awful after a meeting.
Oh, really? Well, you know what? I do, but when you're a guest, for sure you'll get a response to it. But then we'll put you on as a guest at one of these meetings, so you'll get lots of comments. But let's see. Damon's got something he wants to say to you.
I totally agree with you, Sharon. And what I was getting from what you were saying is that it's a question of us using the technology that's out there. And I put something in the chat about that's one of the reasons why we have to concentrate on young people who have been raised with technology. They've been raised with TikTok and all these other things. As a matter of fact, there's been scientific evidence that their brains, their neural pathways are different than ours. And I recently read an article that talked about, like, at the time, this is about 4 years ago, there was 4 generations, and now there's 5 generations, and talked about how every generation enters the capitalist economic, social and political system at a different level of its development or devolvement. So you have the so-called greatest generation, the boomers, the Gen X's, the millennials, and the Zoomers. And it's very difficult for us to be able to relate to them and bring our message to them without having them being a part of that and showing us how to do that. Fortunately for me, I live in a household where every generation is represented, including my 18-year-old Zoomer daughter. So it's been easier for me to try to keep up with all of this stuff. But they speak a different language. And we have to figure out how do we interpret that language and take our message and use those tools that they use, which is texting and TikTok and YouTube and all these different things. So I unless I misunderstood what you were saying, Sharon, that's my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, great.
And thank you, Sherry.
Yeah, okay, yeah, it's sort of like a format of where we have 2 guests and everybody talks back and forth to the guests, but I do like to have collective discussion, so if anybody wants to comment to what anybody else said in this discussion, that's more like a discussion, so feel free to. So we'll have one more speaker here. Frank Hammer's going to say something, and then we put the live transcript on, so for those of you who want that. And I want to remind you all that after we end this discussion, the Michigan Peace Council monthly membership meeting will continue on. So we ask all our members to stay on. And anyone else who cares to stay with us, we'll just have a brief membership meeting and you'll find out what we do. And so let's hear from Frank. Hi, Frank Hammer.
Greetings. This has been very worthwhile. And I appreciate the thoughtful presentations and the data and the concepts. I was part of a call on Sunday. It was an international call that is focused on building an international united front against imperialism and fascism. And I connect the question of fascism, which has been very much brought up in the context of Ukraine, and what all that is, and what the neo-fascists in Ukraine are about. Never mind the rise of neo-fascism in the U.S. is part of that conversation. And in the international call, I had about 80 people that were represented by countries in every continent. And it does need to be international in scope, to be sure. And I do thank Sharon for her remarks, especially about the oppression of critics of Zionism and being labeled as anti-Semitic.
Oops, my mic's off. Yes, thank you very much, Frank. Appreciate that. We discussed this yesterday at the rally too. Yeah, I'm hoping that we can develop some sort of better understanding of the role of imperialism in this whole struggle. And maybe in Detroit area here, we can get some groups that all are focused on that subject, and maybe we can expand the idea of that being a concern, like Bahman said. And I do agree that this is, without understanding the structure, socioeconomic structure of capitalism, and knowing what imperialism is, we can't put all these weird things going on together and realize they're all connected in many ways. I appreciate everyone's comments. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We got much more to discuss, but we're going to have to conclude. I mean, if you want to say one or two last sentences from our two guests, feel free to. Richard and Bahman, and before we let Bahman leave, if you want to say anything, feel free to.
Just thank you very much, and keep the movement going, friends.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for the demonstration on Sunday.
You're welcome.
Bahman?
And on my behalf, I too, me too, I thank you, and I really wish you success in joining together and bringing some peace to this country and the world. Thank you.
Thank you again to our special guests and to all the folks who helped comment and attend the meeting. So we're going to stop the recording right now. And if you want to